So the truth around why men struggle to succeed and hit their goals in life. So this often can feel like, actually, this isn't true for me. Because maybe we do hit goals in certain areas of life. Maybe that's work. Maybe you excel in your job or at work, or perhaps you excel in other areas. Maybe that's health and fitness or whatever. And sometimes we think we are the way we are in life in general. But actually, I've tended to find in myself that some things that apply to one area of life don't apply to the other. For example, I'm super disciplined in health and fitness, but it might not mean that I'm super disciplined in something else. And so we need to be really aware of all these different areas of life and what that's sort of bringing. But the real truth around hitting goals is something that I've come to realize through a lot of deep work and journaling, is that ultimately there's a few practical reasons, right? And those really are not the aim of this video, because they're something that I think of, they're maybe not obvious, but they're there. And it's stuff like, you've just not been specific. Everyone's heard of the SMART goal kind of way to set goals, right? I kind of changed that SMART goal to mean something a bit different. So a lot of it as well is that you don't have aligned goals. They're not aligned to you as a man. They're maybe not risky enough. They're just too comfortable. And part of this is that actually, ultimately, what we're now doing as men is we're trying to just be as comfortable as possible. And the older I get, the more I realize this. And I was joking with someone the other day about how now, 10 years ago, I would never have probably even thought about wearing a waterproof, but now I'm like in full waterproof trousers and top when it's raining. And so ultimately, we just try and stay in comfort. And, it's for a very good reason. Like, we were evolved to avoid pain and go towards pleasure. So it's kind of natural that actually we are looking to just get that pleasure, right? And ultimately, one of the big things that can hold us back is that comfort-based way we live our life. Everything is comfortable. It's like easier to skip a workout than it is to go do it. It's easier to hit the snacks and the junk food than it is to say no. It's easier to get onto your phone and scroll than having to have a deep conversation with your partner. It's easier to say no to the kids that you want to go play with them than it is to go to the gym, get healthy and fit, and then have some epic quality time with them. It's easier to watch TV than it is to read a book and learn and grow. All of these things are easier, and ultimately that means they're just more comfortable. So, like I said, coming from an evolution standpoint, you can see, because obviously we're wired to avoid pain, avoid discomfort, and get pleasure. And the thing is that I think sometimes we can feel like discomfort is wrong. And when we kind of flip that on its head and understand that discomfort is actually where we should be and what we should be striving for, because then ultimately we will end up in pleasure in life. We will be healthy and fit so we can run around and play after our kids endlessly. We will then have a good body and be confident taking our top off on the beach. We will then put our phones down and have a closer relationship with our partners, have a more deep and meaningful connection with them. We will then put our phones down and spend more quality time with our kids, being able to speak to them and nurture them and help them grow. We will stop procrastinating at work, so therefore we'll get the promotion or the new job that we want. We will be more focused and more energetic, and ultimately that leaves us having more meaning in life, because a lot of these things like focus, energy, meaning in life all come from doing the painful stuff first. When we're indulging in bad habits, like scrolling on our phones, or and it's not to say that we can't do these things, it's just how much we're doing them, we're ultimately going to feel more pain in life, because they deplete our energy, they kill our focus, and they ultimately then make us feel lost in life. And so one of the big reasons why men don't hit goals is because of that comfort scenario. Hitting a goal is painful and uncomfortable. It kind of puts yourself out there. And this is where I'm getting to with this point. It puts yourself out into the world that, even if you keep the goal quiet, you know that you've got to get out of your comfort zone to probably hit that goal. If you've set a goal, now one of the practical reasons I was talking about before is if you set a goal that is comfortable, ultimately you're actually not going to hit it because you know that you can. And so we have to hit goals that are uncomfortable, but as soon as we do that, we understand that it's going to be really difficult. It's going to be a lot harder, right, than our current life. We're going to have to go through some pain. And let's just say, I've been a health fitness coach for the last 9.5 years, and it's not really what I do now, but this is something that I've seen a lot in people wanting to lose weight, is that they know that they have to change something, but ultimately the drive of the kind of end goal is maybe lose a few stone. But often during that journey, they'll meet a challenge or a stress or an obstacle, and it's easier just to go back to the comfort, right? So then we end up maybe quitting a coaching program or quitting PT or whatever we're doing, and because we think it's the right thing in the moment, because we need to focus on this other thing, ultimately it ends up in us getting back to where we were, and we go through that cycle endlessly. It's the same for other bad habits. We put boundaries in place with our phones, block apps, we delete apps, or we put our phones in different rooms, and ultimately they're all things that are great and can be really useful tools. However, they're ultimately just going to end up being broken. The same with procrastination. You might have timers on your phone to set, I'm going to focus for this block of period, or you might say, I'm going to make lists and I'm going to plan, I'm going to do this, that and the other. But ultimately they can also just be another procrastination tool to actually not get the stuff done. And what I was journaling the other day, and something came to my head. So this is my own kind of thinking around this and my own experience, but ultimately it comes down to fear. Comfort is a fear-based response, because ultimately it makes us stand out. If you think about the animal kingdom, right? When there's I was going to say a flock, but that's birds, right? When there's a group, I don't know the different names for them, of say wildebeest or something like that, they don't want to stand out, right? Because standing out means you're in danger. But ultimately, this is what the same for us. It means we are in danger. But not just that. There's also a lot of other stuff. It means that if we put ourselves out there and fail, there could be some shame feelings there, or humiliation. Now, of course, there isn't. But this is what the deep conscious is going on in our brains. It's a fear of sort of also who will I be? Will I still be accepted if I hit this goal? If I get into shape, I have this certain identity right now of I can eat a lot or I can drink a lot, and that accepts me into the group of mates that I have. What happens if I get into shape? Will I still be accepted by them? Now, this is not something that's consciously thought, and this is why this is a really hard truth, because you could be listening to this and think this is a load of crap. But I know, because this has taken years and years to get to this realization of comfort is a fear-based response, because ultimately we're staying comfortable out of fear of becoming someone else, because that requires us to stand up, it requires us to be different, it requires us to challenge ourselves. And so ultimately we're staying out of fear. And there's many different fear-based things. It could be fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of who we actually might become, just fear that we're not worthy enough. And I think that drives a lot of men into this comfort-based response. Now, like I said, this doesn't mean it's every single area of life, but ultimately the opposite of that can also be fear. If we're constantly driving and working and pushing hard and always going for it, that can be fear as well, because of the deep-rooted fear of who we might become if we don't do those things. We might become the comfortable man. And so we have to strike this balance. And ultimately, it takes a commitment to change, right? And so it's a commitment or a choice, whatever you want to call it. And so before that is fear. We have fear. Now, ultimately, we can stay in that, right? We can feel, all right, we've got that fear of failure or whatever, and we can just go around in a circle of just fear. Fear, I think about a commitment, no, I'm not going to make it because, it's too scary, and then we go back to fear. We can sometimes even make that commitment to change, but then go straight back into that kind of anxiety or overwhelm or stress and fear and not end up doing it. We can then also actually end up making a commitment to change and then going into that fear, changing and then self-sabotaging. I've seen it so many times that men, excuse me, getting great results, and they ultimately self-sabotage. I've seen it in health and fitness a lot. I've seen it in other areas of life. And it's how we bounce back from those that's important, right? Because ultimately we need that resilience. Now, that's a different story. But most men stay between that fear and commitment gap, right? Got a little diagram here. I'm not sure whether actually you'll be able to see it. But they stay between that fear, on the wrong side, fear and commitment. All right. So they stay in this gap here. And ultimately, that kind of leaves them feeling like a failure, feeling like they're not good enough. And they, like I said, they can't even make that commitment to change. Like, I'm going to get in shape, or I'm going to, I don't know, start to be more present with my kids. I'm going to start to have a deeper relationship with my partner. And then ultimately they get scared, or they're in life, and things come up, and they then feel like a failure, not good enough, or they just don't feel like they're good enough to do that. They don't feel that there might be other blocks in the way, and so they end up straight into failure. You see the arrow going from fear to failure. But we've got commitment, so you can make that commitment and you can end up in failure and not feeling good enough anyway. So you can also, the direct men end up commitment and change. They end up making that commitment and they end up on the straight line to change. That's what direct men do. And they might ultimately end up feeling a bit like a failure because they failed at something, they didn't hit a goal, or they missed it, or it's taken longer than they thought. But they know that they're going to make that commitment again and get straight back to that change. And this is what we need to do as men. There's nothing we need to overcome. We don't need to overcome anxiety or overwhelm or anything like that. We need to just make that commitment and move forward anyway, regardless of what everyone else is saying, what you're saying in your own head. And it's the ability to feel a fear and move forward anyway that's going to change your life and is going to make you hit your goals. Because ultimately we have to understand there's a much deeper belief system down from this surface level thing, and that ultimately does end up in not feeling good enough. It's a fear that you're not good enough for the people that you love the most, and the fear that is deep down in conscious, it keeps you stuck in that position, which ultimately makes you not good enough, right? And this is the problem. We feel like we're not good enough to make that change, or we're not good enough, we just can't do it, or whatever. But the problem is, it's actually the results, it's leading to results in our life that make us feel not good enough. And so we then lose relationships. We maybe end up getting divorced. We're out of shape. We're unfit. We can't play around with kids. We're self-conscious, taking our tops off. We don't progress at work like we want to. We don't succeed at life. And so this kind of is the hard truth that ultimately, like, there's no one going to come and save you. Like, you have to feel that fear and understand that you're never going to feel worthy enough until you just do it anyway, until you actually just take action. And then there's a ton of stuff after that, of course there is. But if you can start to be a bit more of a direct man and go from that straight line and making the commitment to changing, and instead of, and then understand if there is a failure, a setback, a barrier, that it doesn't, you will still get those feelings. I still get those feelings 1,000,000%, but I understand that I need to make that commitment back to the change that I want, and then I go for that change again and I take the action, and time again I do that. There's going to be days where I forget to do that, but ultimately it still comes back to, if I feel like I'm not good enough or a failure, then I make that commitment again and I go towards that change, straight line. And that's one of my main goals this year. As I talked about in a previous YouTube video, it was around straight line momentum and really keeping that focus on that straight line, not zigzagging, not going around in circles, but keeping that focus on the straight line. I've already deviated from that because it's so ingrained. So remember just to keep on the straight line and on that narrow path. And remember, the most important thing here is you don't need to overcome anything. You just need to step out into fear, make a commitment, and then understand that things are only going to change once you take that straight line and make that commitment to change. and run through the fear barrier anyway.